I'd like to welcome you back to another week in our study in the book of Second Corinthians. Today we're picking up in Second Corinthians, the 7th chapter, verse number 5. Now, if you're able, go ahead and get your Bibles out and read along with me and participate along with me. Even take some notes if you'd like. Because when you participate with any speaker, you're going to retain much more than if all you're doing is listening. So get your Bibles out. Join with me as we read 2 Corinthians, the 7th chapter, starting with verse number 5. And the Apostle Paul writes this, "For even when we came into Macedonia, our flesh had no rest, but we were afflicted on every side, conflicts without and fears within." Now, we need to understand that Paul is talking about going to Macedonia. Now, Paul's been to Macedonia several times. After he left Corinth the first time, he went to Macedonia. He's come back to Macedonia, and now on his third missionary journey, he's back in Macedonia. Now, what is Macedonia? It's a region. It included several churches, but the two well-known churches were the church at Philippi and the church at Thessalonica. And so the Apostle Paul is writing this letter from Macedonia, and really it's not the location that he's in as much as what he is saying to us. And again, the Apostle Paul is talking about a servant of God. The 6th and 7th chapters of the book of 2 Corinthians deal with the servants of God. I said this before, but if I was teaching back in a seminary or Bible school, I would be teaching the 6th and 7th chapters of the book of 2 Corinthians because it's a reality check. So many times when we enter into ministry, we have all these great dreams. But you know what? The reality is something completely different. Even back to the man that led me to Jesus, he said, "Leon, if you'll give your life to Jesus, everything will be great." Well, I found out not too long after that not everybody appreciated my new life in Jesus. Not everybody appreciated me being born again. And you know what? We go through struggles. We go through times. And the Apostle Paul in the 6th and 7th chapter of 2 Corinthians is dealing with the reality of ministry. But this is what he says. He says, "For even when we came into Macedonia, our flesh had no rest." What's Paul saying? Paul's saying that our flesh had no rest. Now, when he talks about the flesh, he's not talking about his carnality. He's talking about his physical flesh. In fact, the Greek word that he uses here, sarx, could actually be translated as meat. He's talking about his physical being. But he says that his physical being had no physical rest. Now, what's he talking about? No physical rest in the ministry. He was constantly working. Now, some people say, well, see, Paul was making tents. No, he wasn't. Paul didn't have any rest, but he was ministering to people constantly. And to minister to people really takes a toll on a person's physical body. And so the Apostle Paul says, he says, "We came into Macedonia and our flesh had no rest." And then he continues and he says this, "But we were afflicted on every side." What does it mean to be afflicted? Well, the word afflicted, it figuratively, it means to be oppressed or to be distressed. It actually means to be pressed in, to be crowded in. Have you ever felt like you've been crowded in with things? Maybe they're physical things on the outside. Maybe that wallet that you have there, the amount of money in that wallet is shrinking, and you're feeling pressure from that. Or maybe it's something on the inside of you. Maybe it's a negative self-image. Maybe it's fear. Maybe it's doubt and condemnation and all of those things. Well, the Apostle Paul is saying here, we are afflicted, we are under distress, we are under pressure from all sides, from everything. Doesn't sound too rosy, does it? But again, Paul is giving us a real picture of what it means to be a servant of God. And then he clarifies himself by saying this: conflicts without. Conflicts without. The word conflicts actually could be translated as fightings. We believe that that the Apostle Paul is talking about the persecution that he's experiencing. And the Apostle Paul experienced great persecution. And so he says the conflicts without, and the Apostle Paul is dealing with persecution. And let me just say this, the Apostle Paul is also dealing with the results of persecution. Many people, including myself, believe that Paul had lost an eye while he was being persecuted. And so the Apostle Paul says there's conflicts without. There's this fighting without. On the outside, there's this fighting. But on the inside, the Apostle Paul says this: fears within. What's the Apostle Paul dealing with? He's dealing with fear. The Apostle Paul dealt with fear? Yes, he dealt with fear. How many of you realize that when you're persecuted, you're going to deal with fear? When people are coming against you and speaking against you, you're going to deal with fear. And so the Apostle Paul had to deal with conflicts without and fears within. And then he writes in the next verse, and the next verse is so beautiful, but God. I love those two words together in the English, but God. God made the difference. But God, what does he do? He comforts the depressed. He comforted us by the coming of Titus. What's Paul saying? God showed up. God comforts us. He comforts the depressed. The word comfort here, again, it's the Greek word parakaleo, and it means to come alongside and to speak words of encouragement, to speak words that are going to aid you and help you. And so the Apostle Paul says, but God came and he comforted us, and then he tells us how he comforted him. By the coming of Titus. By the coming of Titus. What does that mean? Titus came alongside Paul and he spoke words of encouragement. What were those words of encouragement? Hey, the Corinthians have received your message. They've repented. They've been reconciled to God. By the way, that reconciled to God is the theme of the book of 2 Corinthians. The Apostle Paul was here in Macedonia. Here comes Titus up from Corinth, and Titus said, Paul, you won't believe this. No, I don't think he said that, but Paul, you know what? You know what happened in Corinth? They received your word. They've repented. They've mourned for their sins, and we're going to get into that later this week. They've mourned, and they've come back, and they're now reconciled to God. They are changing the church. The church is doing great, Paul. And those words from Titus brought great comfort to the Apostle Paul. We're going to continue with verse number 7 tomorrow. So join us as we continue our study in the book of 2 Corinthians.